Are you looking for a rose that's disease resistant, cold hardy, beautiful, pollinator friendly, vigorous, and may even be useful in the kitchen? Well, today I'm going to talk about Rugosa roses, specifically one of my favorite rose varieties in my very own garden right now, and that is Scabrosa. We'll talk about Scabrosa and all of its great qualities, and I'll even chat a little bit more about some other type of Rugosa roses that you may want to add to your garden. So let's get started. Hello, Taylor Sievers here with Sievers Bloomin' Farm. Welcome back to the Bluff Bottom Bloomin' channel, where we talk about all things gardening, growing, especially roses. And today I wanted to do a plant profile of the rose Scabrosa. So first of all, I apologize for this giant weedy mess that we are sitting in right now. We got a lot of work to do this season. Recently had a baby in May, so it's been a little bit hard to get caught up around here. But I just wanted to take some time to talk about this rose because it has been truly a delight to have this one in my garden. I was a little bit concerned the first and second year, because it didn't seem to really be taking off that much, but I still loved the foliage on this one. It reminds me so much of spearmint foliage. It's very textured, very thick and shiny, and it reminds me of a mint plant so much, spearmint specifically. And I have just enjoyed just looking at the foliage on this one. I don't even need to have the blooms personally. But the blooms are also really pretty when they open. They're very brief when they open. They're single petaled. Most Rugosa roses are like that. They're going to have a more open look to them. They might have a couple layers of petals, but most of the time they're single. And they're known for producing their hips. And it's much easier for the insect to get inside the flower and pollinate the flower and thus produce a rose hip, which is the fruit of the rose, if there's not a bunch of layers of petals, right? So this one definitely has more of an open look to it. It's not necessarily as floriferous as I thought it would be. I thought it would, there are times when the weather's a little bit cooler that you have a lot more opening and closing at the same time. Like right now, I assumed that this plant would be just full of blooms, and I do have a lot of buds on it right now, but I don't have a lot that are open. Now I will say the ones that are open, we're in Japanese beetle time of the year, and that is July for us here in Illinois, so that's kind of part of the problem. I know there's some blooms on that side that are just getting ate away by the Japanese beetles, and they do really love a good fragrant rose, and these are pretty fragrant. They're kind of more of the old rose scent, kind of a little bit of a spicy smell to them as well. So I really do enjoy this rose, mostly for the foliage though. And it does, I would say this is probably the fourth year now, third or fourth year, and it's really starting to spread. So it does sucker out a little bit. So I would, this side of the bush and this side of the bush is suckering, and I could definitely dig those up and plant them in another spot. So if you're wanting to create like a hedgerow with this one would be a great hedgerow plant. And also, if you're wanting to keep it more contained, you might want to put it in an area where you can mow around it, so you're not constantly having to manage it. So right now it looks like I would normally mow around this, but it's actually a flower bed and it's a little bit weedy. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to manage these suckers. But honestly, right now I don't care. I love that it's getting so beautiful and full. It's not quite as tall as I thought it would be. This one is extremely thorny. I also tried to propagate it, doing dormant cuttings and winter dormant cuttings. I have not tried to do it with semi-hardwood cuttings yet, but the dormant cuttings was definitely a fail. Like, there was not really much that happened at all. So I do think that maybe this one would be better suited for maybe a semi-hardwood cutting or just digging up the suckers. We'll see how it goes from there. I'll probably experiment with that more, but right now that's been my experience so far. So you learned some information about the Scabrosa rose and why I love it, but I want to talk a little bit more about Rugosa roses in general as well. So Scabrosa is a Rugosa rose. Like I mentioned, they're known for producing larger hips. They are native to, I believe, like the salty sea coasts in Japan and so on. So they're not necessarily native to North America, but they are really excellent in the garden because they are very vigorous. And I see the suckering as a positive thing, especially if you want to use this rose as like a hedge. And so, for example, there is a rose at the Missouri Botanical Garden that is a Rugosa hybrid called Zwerg. And I have loved this every time I've seen it. It's just a beautiful hedge, and it's just got lots of blooms, and the bees just love it. And the foliage is super hardy, vigorous, beautiful. It's not diseased or anything like that. And the bonus with a lot of these Rugosa roses is they're hardy up to zone like 3. So that's really awesome. You don't have to worry about dieback in the winter. So Zwerg is a beautiful rose. Has a little bit more, it's not quite as like, it's got like another layer of petals on it, it looks like, or the bloom is definitely different and lighter pink than Scabrosa. And then also another one that I found to be, I thought, really vigorous and beautiful was I saw it at the zoo, the St. Louis Zoo, but I believe it was the hybrid Rosa rugosa Alba. So that is an older one. And it has white blooms, white single blooms, but the plant itself was just super vigorous. And you could see that there was already some hips starting to form on the plant, which was definitely nice to see, because my Scabrosa, even though it's said to produce hips, I've had an issue getting hips to set, and I don't know what's going on, because the bees are definitely in there in the blooms trying to pollinate it. So I'm not really sure why that is, why they're not actually producing hips. But maybe this will be the year, because my plant has really grown a lot since the beginning. There's also another hybrid that I've had some experience with. Last year we sold a Rosa rugosa hybrid called Therese Bugnet, and it had multiple layers of petals. It's very, very vigorous. I would not say that it's the most beautiful, because it really does not have the repeat blooming like my Scabrosa plant does. But a customer of mine planted the rose, and so she planted it last spring, and this spring it's already 5 foot tall and 4.5 feet wide. It's huge, vigorous. But the bad part is that whenever it did bloom in the spring, we had some really wet weather, and the blooms were kind of nasty. And then now it's not really having that great of repeat. And I've seen a mature variety in the botanical garden as well, and it definitely does have that more upright V shape. And it seems like on the bottom there's not as much foliage. It's like it's just kind of an uglier looking plant. So I'm not as impressed with that one, but it definitely is vigorous. And the customer that I sold it to last year, I just saw it actually the other night, and it hides her propane tank, and I really like that. The foliage is not diseased or anything like that, so it's kind of hiding this ugly structure. And if you had some perennials around the base of it, I think it would be awesome in the garden, because it's not gonna die, basically. So I still think that one is worth planting. So a lot of these Rugosa hybrids, they may not have like the best flowers, but the foliage and the vigorous nature that they have, I think, is well worth it. Lastly, I have actually gotten my hands on some just these species Rosa rugosa finally. It's been really hard for me to find that rose for some reason, and I finally found it from a nursery, and so I planted a hedgerow of that, and They came as these little tiny like sticks, like, but they were like twigs. They were so tiny, and I thought these things are not going to make it. I did lose some, in fairness, but I didn't plant them right away. But the rest of them, they're all taken off now. So that was promising, and they're gonna create a nice little hedge at the front of my garden, and hopefully we'll get some hips from those. That's the main reason why I planted those, is I want some hips, and I really did like the hedge effect that Rosa's Zwerg had at the botanical garden. It was just very full and very productive as far as flowers and what appeared to be hips forming. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's what I want. So I wouldn't make any Rugosa or Rugosa hybrid the center point of my garden. I wouldn't make it the focal point of my garden, but I definitely, around the edges and in places that you're not going to be, you want to hide things or anything like that, or places where you just need something really vigorous to grow that's not super ugly, that will do a job, whether it's provide food over here in the corner, through hips, or just provide some ground cover almost. You'll still probably need to plant some perennials around it, but just to take up some space in the area, I think that Rugosa hybrids and Rugosa in general is worth planting. Again, I love the foliage, especially of Scabrosa. I love, 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 love the way the foliage is. And I've actually had people ask me about, what is that plant? So I think it's worth planting in the garden. So there's my thoughts on Scabrosa and other Rugosa hybrids, and Rosa rugosa as well. And I hope that maybe you'll consider adding one to your garden one day. So thanks for watching. And if you like this video, please subscribe, and see you soon.